Hello beautiful people. In this guide I will review all German prop bombers in the regular tech tree. Hope you enjoy. All the bombers will be reviewed in the following manner. First I will make some short remarks about the bomber. Then there will be a pros and cons section, followed by a look at the bomb load and armament, and lastly there will be some pew pew and final remarks. In general, you can describe the German bombers like this. They're mostly medium bombers. They have good bomb loads, have excellent defensive armament, often with 20mm cannons. Most have good armor protection, even for the gunners. All but the heavy bombers are useful in both ground and air battles, and they all have self-sealing fuel tanks. The individual bombers will have timestamps, so you can easily navigate between them. The first entry for the German bombers is pretty unimpressive. It is the first production model of the two Dornier Do 17s in the game. The second model is almost a completely different bomber. Let's look at some pros and cons. Some of the pros: wing limits. The wings of this Dornier are incredibly strong, with a 640 km/h limit, and that is very strong for any BR 1.0 aircraft. It is pretty much impossible to rip off the wings of this bomber. Flaps limit. Again, the limits for the flaps are crazy. They are stronger than most fighters, with 498, 469 and 320 km/h for combat, takeoff and landing flaps respectively. Armament. Besides the two defensive machine guns, the Dornier also has an offensive machine gun, but more on that later. Web. You can put on web, war emergency power, when you spawn in and keep it on basically all the time. The engines barely get warm. And some of the cons: flight characteristics. Besides being very slow, you can maybe muster 300 km/h in level flight. The Dornier has very strange flight characteristics. It feels as if you're balancing the bomber on a pin. It does not like to turn slowly. You almost have to whip out the turns in order for the Dornier not to become unstable and slide all over the place. The bomber also has a very limited window in where it behaves normally. Once below 250 km/h, it starts to become uncontrollable, and since top speed is just over 300 km/h, you have a very small window of normal behavior. I've not seen this in any other bomber, only this Dornier behaves this oddly. Bomb load. The bomb load is quite poor, but more on that in a bit. Takeoff. With only 4.8 meters a second when you climb, combined with the low speed you already have, when taking off from the airfield, it feels as if you're standing still in the air. Armament. The guidances for the defensive machine guns are rather poor. Landing gear. The landing gear is weak, and you have to be very careful with speed and approach angle in order not to break off the landing gear when touching down. It's a pretty sad affair to look at this bomb load. You can either carry 2 250 kg bombs or 10 50 kg bombs. The total amount of TNT from the two bomb loads are identical. Sadly, this is not even enough to destroy a base on a Battle Rating 1.0 operations map. Let's start out with the machine gun itself. The Germans use a variety of light machine guns, each with incremental improvements. The first we meet is the MG15, and it is already a good start. The MG15 has a high rate of fire with 1050 rounds per minute and good choices in ammunition. Defensive machine guns either use the universal or armor-piercing tracer belts. They pretty much contain the same type of ammunition, including the armor-piercing incendiary tracer bullet. The German machine guns have the highest armor pen at 10 and 100 meters of any light defensive machine gun for bombers in the game. But that is almost irrelevant, since enemy planes are not 10 meters away from you and rarely 100 meters. On to the ventral position itself and its awful guidances. The horizontal guidance of this gun is very bad, with only ±25 degrees. And the vertical guidances are not better with 0 and plus 50 degrees. The 0 degrees, which in my book means horizontally, is not accurate in the game. If you look at the gun itself, you can see that it lies more or less flush with the fuselage, but try look at this. From the gunner view, you can clearly see that this has nothing to do with 0 degrees. This is more like 10 or 15 degrees, and this DO 217 has a huge blind spot behind the plane where the gunners cannot aim. Not good at all. Before we talk about this ventral position, a quick note. The German bombers in general are exceptionally good with the amount of ventral turrets on their bombers. Out of a total of 16 prop bombers, 15 of them have a ventral turret, and that makes me very happy to see. And that was basically my happy voice inflection. The guidances for this position are a mixed bag. The horizontal guidances are fine with plus minus 30 degrees, but the vertical guidances are pretty bad with 0 and minus 35 degrees. And just like on the dorsal position, the 0 degrees here is not accurate at all. The best gun position is the pilot's. He has access to a MG15 with 375 rounds. But that was about the only positive thing I could say. Since the Dornier behaves so goddamn awful, getting this gun on target is difficult and almost pointless. The least effective, but of course the safest way to use this Dornier is by destroying bases. As mentioned, you're not even able to destroy a base on your own. Luckily, you can right after you have dropped your bombs, turn back and dive as fast as you can towards your airfield with no concern for your wings. Taking off and gaining altitude again though is a chore, with a low speed and poor rate of climb. Alternatively, you can use the 10 50 kg bombs and your offensive machine gun to destroy and strafe ground targets with. Once you have spaded the Dornier, the place to be is in mixed battles. Even with all its flaws, a single 50 kg bomb is enough to destroy a light tank, and you can usually escape fighters with just diving away from them. But yeah, this first German bomber is pretty damn bad.
Attack the A point. Attack the B point.
In the German Bomber Tech 3, there are some improvements on bomber variants, which makes them almost perform like a new bomber, and I will go over a few of them. The first is the second of the Dornier DO 217s, the Z2. This bomber is a huge improvement over the lackluster E1 model, and it sets a better rating 1.7. Let's look at some of the pros and cons. Some of the pros: flight characteristics. The Z2 has around 30% more engine power compared to the E1, and that translates into around 420 km an hour with a full bomb load using whip. This is a huge improvement over the E1's 300 km an hour. The Z2 is heavier to handle, but in this case it has almost eliminated the strange feeling of balancing on a pin. It is still there, but not nearly as bad. The wings and flap limits are almost identical to the E1 model, which means that they're very strong. Bombload. The bombload has doubled from that of the E1 variant, but more on that in a bit. Armament. Also here we see large improvements. Instead of 2 defensive machine guns on the E1, the Z2 has 7. Takeoff. With improved engine power, takeoffs are much smoother and you can climb faster. Armor protection. Here we already have the first German bomber with decent armor protection. There's a large armor plate with the same dimensions as the fuselage in front of the dorsal gunner, and he has a second plate protecting the top of the fuselage in front of him. The pilot seat is armored, and there's an armor plate protecting the bottom of the cockpit. And some of the cons. Landing gear. The landing gear is still weak, so you need to be careful when landing. Bomb load. Although you have doubled the bomb load from the E1 variant, the options are still very limited. Instead of the E1 variant's 10 50kg bombs, you can now carry 20. Oddly enough, did the improved capacity not translate into 4 250kg bombs, here you can still only carry 2. Starting out with the dorsal gunner, this guy can become super basic now since he can use 3 different light machine guns. The regular dorsal gun has the same awful vertical guidances as the E1 model, so 0 and plus 50, which is not true and awful. The horizontal guidances have almost doubled from plus minus 25 degrees to plus minus 45 degrees, so that is pretty nice. He now also has access to 2 beam or waist positions, also with MG15s. Here he only has 375 rounds for each of the guns, but they are not used nearly as often. The vertical guidances are poor with only minus 1 degrees because of the wing and plus 10 degrees. The horizontal guidances are plus minus 45 degrees. The ventral position has also received an upgrade. He now has a window and much better guidances. Vertical guidances are now minus 35 and plus 30 degrees. With the plus 30 degrees, the large blind spot behind the bomber has decreased a lot, and the problem is now mainly the dorsal gunner's coverage. The ventral gunner is also manning these cheek positions. Like the beam positions, he has an MG15 at both stations, but the guidances are different. Instead of the plus minus 45 degrees of horizontal guidance, the cheek guns have minus 1 and plus 45 degrees, meaning that he is assisting the nose turret covering the front of the bomber. Since these guns are almost free of the wings, he now has plus minus 10 degrees of vertical guidance. In the nose we find yet another MG15. This gunner has an odd horizontal guidance because of his position with minus 10 and plus 50 degrees. The vertical guidances are good with minus 60, so he can really depress the gun, but only 5 degrees upwards. Lastly we have the MG15 for the pilot. Like the pilot on the E1 model, he has 375 rounds for the gun. And since the flight characteristics have improved some, it is a little more useful now. This Stowe 17 Z2 model is useful in both ground and air battles. Unlike the E1, you can here destroy more than 2 bases around your battle rating with the 20 50kg bombs. It is a little odd that I, with the E1 variant, was not able to destroy even a single operations map base. In this match I was up tiered and still able to destroy 2.5 bases on this operations map. But not all operations map require the same amount of TNT dropped on bases even at the same battle rating. You really only have one choice for bomb load though, and that is of course the 20 50kg bombs. But not only are they good to destroy bases with, you can also destroy a bunch of ground targets. In mixed battles, the Z2 also performs good. You still have to deal with an annoying blind spot for the dorsal gunner, but if you maneuver the plane some, it can work out. Because of the small TNT content of the 50 kg bomb, I usually drop 2 or 3 of them on a vehicle. Since you have 20 bombs total, dropping them in small groups is just fine. With the speed of the Z2, you also have a good chance to outrun by and some monoplane fighters in level flight and in dives. The Z2 is really a huge improvement over the E1 variant and worth using.
Enemy forces have captured the zone. Attention to the designated grid zone!
At battle rating 1.7 we find the latest addition to the German bomber line, the BV-138C1. This BV is a player created model that got Jin added to the fold, and what a beauty it is. Yes, I like flying boats. Hashtag flying boats love. Let's look at some of the pros and cons for the BV. Some of the pros: survivable. The BV can take a surprisingly large amount of damage before going down. Part of the reason is the amount of empty space in the plane. It's a rather large aircraft and there's plenty of room for, well, nothingness. So there's a good chance that an attacker will not hit any critical components for a while. The BV will at battle rating 1.7 mostly face light machine gun armed fighters and can soak up a lot of those rounds somewhat easily. Furthermore, the BV has 2 pilots, so a single lucky shot to the cockpit will not take out the plane. Armament. The BV has for its battle rating quite heavy defensive armament, but more on that later. Floaty McFly. One of the BV's strengths is the ability to land on water in naval battles, capture points, and possibly even survive it. And some of the cons. Flight characteristics. The BV handles like it looks. It's slow and heavy to control. The top speed of 283 km an hour is found at sea level, which is rarely seen in War Thunder. You really don't get to that speed often though. You can expect speeds of around 230 km an hour in level flight. Rate of climb is barely existent with only 2.2 meters a second, so climbing to altitude after takeoff is quite painful and slow. Although the BV is somewhat heavy to control, it's actually pretty good at turning. Turn time is 39 seconds, but I do think it's more nimble than that. As you would expect, diving to safety with the BV is not really possible. Wings rip at only 450 km an hour. Bomb load. The BV can carry a single, very limited bomb load, but more on that in a bit. Armament. The BV has blind spots behind and below the aircraft. The rear gunner can, because of the design of the fuselage, only depress -10 degrees, and the large tail section also gives the gunners difficulties with aiming. Armor protection. Like almost all other flying boats in War Thunder, the BV has no armor protection at all. The bomb load of the BV is external and very limited. What you see is what you get. The bomb load hangs under the right wing and consists of 6 50 kg bombs. Moving on. Starting out with the rear turret, we find the first 20mm cannon. It's the effective MG151, capable of firing the deadly Miniga shots. The rate of fire for the cannon is a good 750 rounds per minute, and you have a very large ammo capacity with 900 shells. This is more than a lot of defensive light machine guns have. The best build to use for air battles is the universal build. Here you find one tracer shell followed by 2 of the high explosive shells, making this build very dangerous for enemy planes. For ground strafing in both air and in mixed battles, I suggest you use the armored targets build. Here you find 2 types of AP shells, one with and one without HE filler and the mini shot shell. The turret's horizontal guidances are -100 and +140 degrees, which is pretty generous. There's a large problem with the vertical guidances though. The 55+ degrees are okay, but the -10 degrees of depression is bloody awful. Because of the design of the fuselage aft, the gun cannot depress further. This means that from behind and below, the BV is completely defenseless. It also means that you either have to stay at sea level or maneuver a lot at altitude to try to deny fighters attacking you from that angle, and it is very difficult to do so. Just above the rear turret, we find I will call it dorsal turret. Here we find a 13mm heavy machine gun, the MG131. The 131 is a very fast-firing heavy machine gun with 900 rounds per minute. The build of choice is the armored targets build. Here you find good armor pins so you can take out engines, with the added benefit of the immediate action incendiary round to try to set them on fire. Here we also have a generous amount of ammo with 1450 rounds. This position has very good guidances. Horizontally it is ±100 degrees, and the vertical guidances are +55 and -15. The nose of the BV is protected by another 20mm MG151. Here you have even more ammo than the rear gunner has. I suppose it is because it was used for strafing ships. Also here we find very good guidances. Horizontally it is a very generous ±110 degrees, and that is quite rare for a nose turret. Vertically it is again not so great with -30 degrees because of the fuselage, but a good ±55 degrees. The BV is not a good bomber. You can only destroy a single base at your battle rating on a regular map. On operations maps, you can barely take off 50% of a base.
Affirmative. Defend our base! Somebody attack him!
The best and most entertaining way to play and use the BV is in the role of a gunship. Just drop the bombs right away and go bomber hunting, try help protect fellow bombers, although your low speed will make it a challenge, or play with the fighters that will surely go after you. With your heavy armament, you only need a couple of hits with a 20mm mini shot shell to make any fighters blow up, and it is very gratifying to watch. Since you have 1000 shells for your nose turret, you can also use that 20mm cannon to possibly destroy a large amount of ground targets. In this instance, you can see how much damage the BV can take and survive. The P-36 hit the bomber with a large amount of light and heavy machine gun fire, destroying components and killing all but one pilot, while the BV having 2 pilots is quite nice. The BV also works somewhat in mixed battles. Here, either fly over the ground action to drop a bomb or two and quickly move away, especially try to stay clear of the vehicle spawn with all the SPAGs hanging out in that area. You can of course try to strafe them with your guns, but it is pretty dangerous. You are very slow and last, presenting an easy target for them. Instead, try stay at the outskirts of the center and just sit and wait for fighters to go after you. It is of course hit and miss, but it can be quite rewarding.
The Heinkel 111 was one of Germany's most used bombers. In War Thunder we have 3 variants spread out over 2 ranks, and they are somewhat different, so I'll review the first and the last of them. The first entry, the Heinkel 111 H3, we find a battle rating 1.7, and at this battle rating the bomber is very effective. Let's look at some of the pros and cons. Some of the pros. Flight characteristics. This Heinkel behaves good at all speeds. Turn time is adequate with 33 seconds, and with combat flaps engaged you can really turn the Heinkel around, giving it a much smaller turning radius. Wing limits are 480 km an hour, but you can reach speeds of around 550 km an hour on a dive without losing your wings, and that is pretty okay for a heavier bomber. Combat and takeoff speeds are okay with 406 and 379 km an hour respectively. Landing flap speeds are average with 260 km an hour. The landing gear is very strong, and you can lower it even at 360 km an hour if you need to reduce speed even more before landing. Bomb load. The Heinkel has for its battle rating a good bomb load, and more on that in a bit. Armament. The Heinkel has a machine gun pointing in almost every direction, giving you, for this type of bomber, good coverage. Airframe. The bomber can absorb a good amount of light machine gun fire before going down. Armor protection. Unlike almost all other nations, Germany seems to appreciate all of its crew, both pilots and gunners. The pilot has an armored seat, there is an armor plate at the bottom of the cockpit, and there are 5 armor plates protecting the 3 gunners in the aft section. You go Germany, keep up this trend. Hashtag armor protection for gunners. And some of the cons. Slow-ish. You will most likely never see the top speed of 435 km an hour, since it is found at 6,000 meters. It is basically a waste of your time and effort to try climb to that altitude at this low battle rating. You can expect around 360 km an hour heading towards the target and close to 400 km an hour once you have dropped all your bombs. Whip. The water-cooled engines overheat quickly, and you can only use war emergency power for a short time compared to other bombers. They do cool down fast, but it only takes a short time before you need to take them off whip again. You only have 2 bomb load options, but they are both good in their own rights. With the 8 250 kg bombs, each containing 125 kg of TNT, you can destroy several bases even in full up tier. The German bombs are in general very good, and the 250 kg bomb is no different. It has enough TNT to do a lot of damage to a single base, and you can destroy one, if not several tanks with one bomb in mixed battles. If you want to bomb ground targets in air battles, the 32 50 kg bombs is the way to go. But I would not use that bomb load for other tasks than that. The Heinkel's defensive armament consists of a bunch of MG15s spread all over the place. And since the Heinkel does not have any tail gunner, let's as usual start with the dorsal gunner. The dorsal gunner has for this type of open gun position probably the best guidances I've seen on any bomber. The horizontal guidances are very good with plus minus 125 degrees. Also the vertical guidances are good with minus 3 and plus 65 degrees. The gunner has of course a blind spot just around the vertical stabilizer, but it is surprisingly small. The 2 waist or beam positions have for this type okay guidances. They are plus minus 35 degrees, both horizontally and vertically. Not the best, but not the worst either. In the gondola we find 2 gun positions. First we have this ventral rear firing position, and for this type of position, again with great guidances. Horizontal guidances are plus minus 40 degrees and vertical guidances are minus 57 and a grade plus 22 degrees, which helps minimizing the blind spot behind the bomber. Facing forward in the gondola, we have this guy. The guidances are not as good as the rear firing positions, but it is okay and it can help the nose gunner defend the front. Horizontal guidances are plus minus 35 degrees and vertically is minus 45 and plus 3 degrees. In the nose we find this interesting upward firing gun position. It is highly unusual and can be surprisingly fun since we can use it as a schräge Musik against unsuspecting enemy bombers. Horizontal guidances are minus 25 and plus 14 degrees, and vertically is minus 55 and plus 30, which means you can shoot straight up. We also have the more traditional nose gun with a not so great plus minus 22 degrees of horizontal guidances. It also has a very nice minus 62 but bad 0 degrees of horizontal guidance. So it's a mixed bag really. But luckily, as mentioned before, the forward firing gun position in the gondola will help out this position. The Heinkel is good in both air and ground battles and is for its battle rating a very effective bomber. With the 8 250 kg bombs you can destroy up to 4 bases at your battle rating. In full up tier on a regular 4 base map you can destroy 2.5 bases, which in itself is pretty good. Although the Heinkel is not very fast, you don't have to be too concerned with being intercepted heading towards your target in air battles. At this low battle rating, the speed is okay. The Heinkel is pretty sturdy and also because of the heavy armor, it can really protect its gunners. This ensures that they're able to fight back and don't get knocked out easily. The bomber is both nimble and a steady bombing platform. That means that you don't have any issues targeting individual tanks.
Attention to the designated grid square. Yes. Let's keep the pressure on. Victory is close.
At battle rating 2.0 and 2.3, we find the JU-88, A1 and A4 variants. The A4 is an upgrade over the A1 in basically all aspects, that being engine power, defensive armament, bomb load and armor protection. There's really no need to use and spade the A1 at all, just skip it and use the vastly improved A4 variant, which I'm going to review right now. And with that said, on to the pros and cons. Some of the pros. Flight characteristics. Top speed is a good 455 km an hour at 5,600 meters. The rate of climb is around 5 meters a second with full bomb load, which is not too bad. So getting to 5,600 meters if you want to is doable. Normally though, I would not recommend it. Just stick with the 3,500 meters you normally spawn in at, and you can still get very close to the top speed. The wings have a very high speed limit with almost 700 km an hour, so there's a good chance that you can dive away from baddies chasing you. Combat and takeoff flaps limits are also great with 457 and 428 km an hour respectively. Landing gear limit is also good with 310 km an hour, and landing flaps limits are above average with 280 km an hour. Bomb load. The Ju-88 has very good bomb load options, and more on that in a bit. Armament. Although the A4 variant does not have as many defensive positions as other bombers, they are equipped with very fast-firing light machine guns, and more on that in a second. Armor protection. The bomber has a mix of armor plates and bulletproof glass protecting the entire crew. Diving brakes. As one of the few bombers in War Thunder, this bomber is equipped with diving brakes. The brakes are useful both for steadying the bomber in dive bombing, but are also great for fast landings and thereby helping to get quickly airborne again. And some of the cons: low speed handling. The A4 handles well at higher speeds, but there is an issue below 300 km an hour. At those speeds, the A4 becomes quite heavy and not willing to turn correctly with a full bomb load. Once the external bomb load has been dropped, the poor low speed handling disappears and the Junkers becomes quite nimble. Armament. Attack from the sides. The bomber has no way of defending itself. The defensive firepower is mainly directed towards the rear of the bomber. Crew location. All of the crew is located in a cramped cockpit, and even though armored, some well-placed bursts from a heavy machine gun can potentially kill both the gunners and the pilot in one go. I suppose this can also be considered half a pro, since hits to the cockpit is the only location that can disable any crew member. The bomb load of the A4 is quite versatile. You can either go with a hard-hitting combo of the 1-ton and 500 kg bomb, or on the other hand, go for the 4 250 kg bombs and 28 50 kg bomb combo. The dorsal gunner has this odd-looking but effective light machine gun setup. In real life, I suppose the navigator could man the second machine gun, but in War Thunder the dorsal gunner can luckily use both guns at the same time. Here we also find a new light machine gun, the MG81. The MG81 uses the same ammo as the MG15, but has a much higher rate of fire with 1600 rounds per minute. These light machine guns are very effective and can quickly pick apart a fighter. The two guns have a plus 50 degrees horizontal guidance left and right and can overlap their fire. The vertical guidance is 0 and plus 45 degrees, and the 45 degrees is adequate only at best. In combination with the ventral gunner, there is vertically no blind spots behind the aircraft, and that is quite rare and nice to see. The ventral gunner lies in the gondola and has access to twin MG81s. The horizontal guidances are good for this kind of position with plus minus 40 degrees, and also the vertical guidances are fine with minus 45 and plus 5 degrees. And the plus 5 degrees is what makes it possible not to have any blind spots behind the bomber. There is no dedicated nose gunner, but instead we find the last MG81 used by the pilot. This version of the MG81 has lower but still very good rate of fire with 1100 rounds per minute. Also improved from the other bombers with a pilot controlled gun is the amount of ammo he can play with. It is now up to 750 rounds, which makes this gun more useful. The Ju-88 is another great medium bomber Germany has access to. It is a step up from the HE-111H3 in regards to speed, available bomb loads, and overall survivability. Luckily, all the bombs from the external bomb load can be dropped individually and not in pairs, making it possible to min-max the TNT dropped. I had set the bomb series to 4, so I just needed to hit the key twice in order to drop 8 bombs. Setting the bomb series is a great way to get the most out of the 50 kg bombs. Individually, they only contain 25 kg of TNT, so setting the series to 4 gives you more bang for the buck and a much better chance of scoring a tank kill in ground RB. With the two 500 kg bombs and 28 50 kg bombs, you can destroy about 2.5 bases at your own battle rating and 2 on an operations map.
The diving brakes can become, as seen here, very handy for a quick descent towards the airfield, followed by an easy landing. The A4 also shines in mixed battles with its bomb load, speed and ability to defend itself. I prefer to use the 4 250 kg bombs and 28 50 kg bombs. This way I get at least 4 good chances for a tank kill with the added fun of some smaller 4 bomb series dropped on vehicles after. Also at Battle Rating 2.3 we find the first 4-engine long-range bomber for Germany, the Focke-Wulf 200C1 Condor. This long-range maritime patrol aircraft was originally a civilian airliner and transport aircraft that got converted into a bomber. This conversion is clearly seen as the Condor has originally no internal bomb bay and has limited bomb load for such a large aircraft. Let's look at some of the pros and cons. Some of the pros: flight characteristics. I was initially pondering if this was a pro or con, but after spending some time playing the Condor, I decided it overall to be a pro. The top speed is 378 km an hour and is found at 1500 meters. At spawn altitude you can expect around 330 km an hour with WEP. Turn time says 34 seconds with a full bomb load, but it feels a little slower than that at high altitudes. At low altitudes it behaves better. Rate of climb with a full bomb load is supposed to be 0.4 meters a second, and that is of course rubbish. Even with a full bomb load, the Condor has no issues climbing from the airfield. In fact, it actually does it quite fast. Wing limits are okay with 450 km an hour, and you will not really get to that kind of speed anyhow. Flap speed limits are 333 km an hour and 310 km an hour for combat and takeoff flaps. That might sound low, but for this Focke-Wulf and its overall speeds, the numbers are fine. Landing gear and landing flap speeds are very low though, with only 200 km an hour for both, so you need to be careful with the landings, especially with the landing gear. High altitude spawn. Luckily for the Condor, it spawns in as a long range bomber spawn. This means greater initial survivability and longer time before the Condor can be intercepted. Takeoff. Strangely enough, the Condor's takeoff distance with a full bomb load is ridiculously short. You're basically airborne as quickly as any fighter and with only 150 km an hour. Bomb load. With 1.7 tons of TNT, the Condor has one of the largest bomb loads for any bomber at the battle rating. Whip. You can, when you spawn in, hit whip and keep it on. The engines never overheat at high altitudes. And some of the cons. Fuel tanks. The Condor was a long-range maritime patrol aircraft and it has fuel everywhere in the wings and fuselage. This fact counts massively against it in-game. The tanks are easy to hit and they catch fire easily as well. Armament. The Condor only has turrets armed with single-light machine guns, which are not enough to defend such a large aircraft. Armor protection. The Focke-Wulf has no armor protection, but for the seat the pilot sits on, nothing for the gunners. Bomb load. Although the amount of TNT the Condor can drop is good, the way it's being delivered limits the bomb load options. While you have access to 5 different bomb loads with the Condor, there's really only one good one, and that is the 6 500 kg bomb one. With that bomb load, you get close to 1.6 tons of TNT dropped. You get the largest TNT content with the 2 1000 kg bombs and the 2 500 kg bombs. But with how small the added internal bomb bays are, the 1 ton bombs can only be mounted under the wings, and they both drop at the same time. This also means that unless you use them on an airfield, pretty much one of the 1 ton bomb's TNT content is wasted. So to maximize your bomb usage, only use the 6 500 kg bombs unless you go directly for the enemy airfield. As mentioned, the defensive armament on the Condor is pretty lackluster, but not useless. Starting out with the dorsal turret, we sadly do not find the fast-firing MG81, but the older MG15. All the gun positions on the Condor are equipped with the MG15s. I suppose it makes sense that the Condor only has MG15s, since the Condors did not have the highest priority, I would think. As a plus, all the gunners have plenty of ammunition. The gun has very good horizontal guidances with plus-minus 110 degrees, and the vertical guidances are a good -5, but only decent plus 45 degrees. In the gondola/bomb bay we find 2 gun positions. This rear ventral one has good horizontal guidances with plus-45 degrees. The vertical guidances are an okay -44 degrees and a very impressive plus 34 degrees. The plus 34 degrees combined with the dorsal gunner's -5 degree means that there's vertically no blind spots behind the bomber. In the front part of the gondola we find this position. The horizontal guidances are not good with only plus-15 degrees, while the vertical guidances are much better with -45 and plus 5 degrees. There is no nose turret as such, but instead we have this forward firing position located above and slightly behind the cockpit. The horizontal guidances are very bad with only plus-14 degrees, and vertically it's -6 and plus 40 degrees. Sadly, there's a blind spot directly in front of the Condor, which neither of the frontal firing gunners can cover, so a direct head-on attack on the Condor cannot be defended against. At the Condor's battle rating of 2.3, you can destroy 3 bases, drop 2 500 kg bombs per base and head home. You can do that by either climbing and loitering at high altitude, seeing how the match turns out for other bombers on your team, and just wait and hit whatever's left. The danger with that approach is that it is time consuming, and late in the match there's a good chance that some fighters will climb to your altitude for an easy kill, and that means you. Alternatively, just ping a base and head straight for it. That way you have a good chance to drop your bombs before any fighters can climb to your altitude.
victory will be ours. Let's keep the pressure on. Victory is close. A little more effort and victory will be ours.
The counter can work in mixed battles, but you need to read the battle and only spawn in when you have some friendly fighters up with you. The counter is going to be very slow though, and when you maneuver over the battlefield, don't expect speeds much more than 200 km an hour.
Enemy forces have captured a zone.
At battle rating 2.7 and 3.0, we find the last two Heinkel 111s, the H6 and H16 models. As usual, with variants of the same planes grouped like this, there are some differences between them. All three 111s share more or less the same flight performance, with the H6 and H16 having slightly more powerful engines. The H6, sitting at battle rating 2.7, is an anti-shipping variant. Defensively, it only has rifle caliber MG15s, but more interestingly, able to carry torpedoes and a special weapon, the glide bomb Fritz X. I have previously made a guide on how to use the Fritz X. If you're interested, the video is linked in the description and right up there in the top right corner. The H6 also has a rarely seen rifle caliber defensive machine gun in the tail. This machine gun can move 5 degrees in all directions, giving the H6 model some defensive firepower direct aft, which none of the other Heinkels are capable of. One last item on the list of differences is the new user-made cockpit that is now only seen on the H16 model. It has a lot of lovely detail, and it's great to see that someone put the time and effort into something like this for all of us to enjoy. Kudos. Since the pros and cons section mostly will be a copy-paste from the H3 model, I will not go over all of them again, but highlight some differences and go over the weapons and bomb bay of the last H16 model. Some of the pros. Bomb load. The H6 and the H16 models can now carry the 1000 kg bomb, which has 600 kg of TNT. Armament. The H16 model has received a lot of upgrades, but more on that later. Armor protection. The H16 model has even more protection than the already impressive armor from the previous two variants. The Dorsal Gunner has an additional 60mm bulletproof glass section in front of him, and the oil coolers of the engines have an armored top cover. And the con, slow. The speed of the battle rating 1.7 H3 model was fine with a full bomb load, but now at 2.7 and 3.0, the H6 and H16 models struggle even with upgraded engines. In a full up-tier match, the H16 model at battle rating 4.0 will face interceptors with air spawns like the P61 and XP50. Interceptors like those two and others are going to be very dangerous for the Heinkel, and they will have a good chance of reaching the bomber before it's over the target area. The H16 variant has some nice bombload options. The bombload containing the most TNT is the 2 1-ton and 1 250 kg bomb. That bombload contains 1.3 tons of TNT and is best used for base bombing. You can also choose to go ground pounding with the 8 250 kg or 32 50 kg bombs. All 4 bombloads can be used for great effect in mixed battles, depending on how adventurous you want to be. Instead of a light machine gun, we now find a 13mm heavy machine gun in the dorsal turret. The great horizontal guidance of the H3 model is gone, and this turret only has plus-minus 40 degrees of horizontal guidance, which is pretty bad for such an important position. Vertical guidances are much better, with a good plus 70 degrees and minus 5 degrees. In the 2 waist or beam positions, we find the fast-firing MG81. The guidances for these positions are okay, with minus 40 and plus 30 degrees horizontally. Vertically it's also okay, with minus 15 and plus 40 degrees. In the gondola we have this ventral position. Oddly enough, the horizontal guidances of the Zwilling is actually better than the ones of the dorsal position. Here we have plus minus 45 degrees. The vertical guidances are good with minus 45 and plus 35 degrees. Combined with the dorsal turret's minus 5 degrees, the 35 degrees here means that there is only a small blind spot behind the bomber. The nose gunner has the largest defensive weapon on the bomber with its 20mm MG FFM cannon. The MG FFM is older than the MG 151 but can also fire the high explosive mini-geschoss. The difference is that this cannon has lower Moss velocity than the 151 and the high explosive shell self-detonates after around 800 meters. For this type of nose position, the plus minus 38 degrees of horizontal guidance is not bad at all. Vertically it's pretty limited though, with only plus 15 and minus 10 degrees. You can have a lot of fun with this turret, hunting down enemy bombers. As mentioned earlier, especially with the H16 model, the match BR you're getting into is pretty important for your survivability. In this instance I was down tiered, so I didn't really have to worry too much about being intercepted before I could drop my bombs. If I had been up tiered, the chances for the H16 to go straight to the base before being intercepted would be much lower. With a bomb load of the 2 1-ton and 1 250 kg bomb, you can destroy 2 bases and maybe help destroy a third with the remaining 250 kg bomb. After the large bombs have been dropped, you can wait with the last bomb. The Heinkel will have much improved speed and maneuverability, and you can wait and see what happens. I used the time to hunt down a PPM and destroy it with the nose gunner's 20mm cannon. In mixed battles, all the bomb loads are actually viable. In case you don't feel too confident with the Heinkel, just pick the 2 1000 kg and the 250 kg bomb and have some fun with that. At any battle rating, the 1-ton bomb can bring a lot of happy pixelated destruction. If you have fighter cover and feel good about yourself, pick the 8 250 kg bombs or spread some joy with the 32 50 kg bombs. Just remember that you are still a bomber and just dip in and out of the battlefield, drop some bombs, move away from the center of the map, and rinse and repeat. At Battle Rating 4.7, we have 4 different variants of the Dornier DO 217 bomber, and that is just ridiculous. The E2 and E4 variants are slower, having less engine power than the later K1 and M1 variants. The E's are fast with over 480 km an hour, but the last M1 is almost 100 km an hour faster with 560 km an hour. The E variants both have a 20mm cannon for offensive use, and the E4 variant is the best armed of all 4 of them. All 4 variants share the same bomb load, but the K1 and M1 are also able to carry torpedoes. I wish the E variants were at Battle Rating 4.3. They are slower than the later variants, and they could be used in a mixed battles lineup where they would fit in nicely. Both the US and Russia have bombers at Battle Rating 4.3 fitting perfectly into that lineup. Germany does not. Furthermore, Germany does not have a single ground vehicle at Battle Rating 4.7. For this guide, I will do a review of the most versatile variant, the E4. Later, when I take out the E4 for some fun, I will also talk about the M1 variant, which I think is best used for air and naval battles. Let's look at some of the pros and cons. Some of the pros. Flight characteristics. Even though the E4 is one of the slower variants of the DO 217s, it is still fast with a top speed of 480 km an hour, reached at 5,700 meters. The wing limits are high as well with 700 km an hour, so you can almost use the 217s as a dive bomber, but without the diving brakes. Bomb load. With a maximum TNT content of 2.4 tons, the 217s can carry a heavy bomb load for its size. Armament. The armament for the E4 is quite strong for the size of the bomber, and even the pilot has access to a 20mm cannon. Armor protection. Again, the Germans are not letting us down. We have armor protection for the dorsal and ventral turret gunner. The pilot seat is also armored, and so is the bottom of the cockpit. And some of the cons. Flight characteristics. Although the wing limits are high, once you get to around 500 km an hour, the Dornier becomes quite heavy, not completely unresponsive, but very slow in reacting to the input, and it is something to beware of in a dive towards the target. The 217 also becomes quite heavy at lower speeds. The sweet spot for good behavior is between 3 and 400 km an hour. The bomber does unfortunately not have any combat flaps, and the limits for takeoff and landing flaps are not great with 357 and 270 km an hour. The bomber does not like to touch down with more than 150 km an hour. If you are faster, you will be in for a bouncy landing. Takeoff. Taking off from forward airfields and air battles can get a little too interesting. With the 4 1000 kg bombs, the 217 is slow in picking up speed, and you are very close to the end of the runway before you get airborne. Combined with initial low rate of climb being that heavy, you can have some close calls with trees and buildings at the end of the runway. Crew location. Although armored, at Battle Rating 4.7, pretty much all enemy fighters you'll meet will either have cannons or heavy machine guns. A couple of good bursts to the cockpit will either disable the gunners, the pilot, or both, sending the Dornier back to the hangar. You have a total of 7 different bomb load options. Once unlocked, I will stick with 2 of them. The hardest hitting bomb load is the 4 1-ton bombs with a total of 2.4 tons of TNT. For versatility, the option with the 8 250 kg bombs is also good. The rest of the bomb loads you can more or less disregard. Although this dorsal turret design looks more like a regular turret able to rotate 360 degrees, it cannot. The horizontal guidances are still for a cockpit turret the best for a German bomber yet, with plus minus 135 degrees. Also vertically, we here have a new record with plus 85 degrees and 0 degrees. In the one-man gondola, we find the ventral gun. Strangely and unfortunately enough, he has twice the ammo count compared to the dorsal gunner, who would have much more use for it. The guidances for this gun are awful, while all of the ammo seems wasted here. Horizontally, it is a merely plus minus 25 degrees, and even worse, vertically, where this turret counts, it is only minus 25 and 0 degrees. This means that the gun can cover the direct aft of the E4, but is barely able to depress and cover the underside of the bomber. Just behind the dorsal turret we have these waist or beam positions. I'm refusing to say beam guns. Hashtag beam weapons for bombers. I can understand the decision in not using the better MG81s, since these positions are not that useful. Horizontal guidances are plus minus 30 degrees, and vertically it's plus 55 and minus 3 degrees. As mentioned, they're really not that useful, but I guess it's better than nothing. The nose turret is equipped with a 20mm MG FFM cannon. Unfortunately, the range of motion for the cannon is awfully limited. Horizontal guidances are only plus 15 and minus 10 degrees, and is just slightly better vertically with plus 17 and minus 14 degrees. Also in the nose, we find the 20mm MG151 operated by the pilot. This weapon is much more useful than the gunner's cannon, since you do not have to change positions in order to use it. Both can be used for great effect on enemy bombers, and the cannon used by the pilot can surprise most fighters, since few are aware of the E4's capability. With the 4 1000 kg bombs, the Dornier 217s can destroy 2 bases on an operations map, and up to 4 bases on a regular map at its own battle rating at 4.7. At battle rating 4.7, most fighters will start to climb right away, and only some strike aircraft and the odd fighter are staying at low altitudes. The best way to ensure a successful bombing run with the E4 is to dive towards the bases. You can easily reach speeds up to 600 km/h plus, and I do not remember the last time I was intercepted before reaching the bases with this approach. Even though the bomber has a decent rate of climb on paper, it is very much reduced by the 2 1-ton bombs hanging under the wings. This makes it much heavier and induces parasitic drag. If you choose to go for the more traditional way of level bombing, I do not suggest that you side climb with the E4. Even though the bomber has a decent rate of climb on paper, it is very much reduced by the 2 1-ton bombs hanging under the wings. Climbing with the E4 is very time consuming, and when you reach 5000 meters, the small stubby wings, match climbing the remaining 700 meters to top speed, are chore, and it is not worth it at all. The external bomb load also reduces the top speed in level flight with more than 50 km/h. At 3500 meters where you spawn in, you can with a full bomb load get up to around 420 km/h with the E4, which is pretty good in itself. An additional benefit is that you can whip at that altitude for a very long time. You rarely, if ever, get the engines to overheat, they stay orange only. The E4 is also good for taking out ground AI units. The 1-ton bombs can take out several targets with one hit, and the 20mm cannon can destroy AAA and artillery sites. Alternatively, bring the 8 250 kg bombs instead as bomb load for this purpose.
Let's keep the pressure on. Victory is close. Commencing attack.
Things are a little different with the last variant, the M1 model. This bomber is around 100 km an hour faster than the E4, but has no pilot controlled weapon, and the nose gunner's position has a 30mm heavy machine gun instead of the 20mm cannon. The defensive armament towards the rear is the same as the E4. In level flight, at your spawn altitude of 3,500 meters, you can get very close to an impressive 500 km an hour. So here you often do not even have to dive in order to reach the target before the enemy fighters catch up to you. Of course, you can also stay even safer and dive towards the bases as you can with the E4 variant. I would not use the M1 for ground pounding though. Here, the lack of the 20mm pilot controlled cannon reduces the versatility quite a bit. With the increased engine power of the M1, you can also side climb much faster than possible with the A4. Things do slow down beyond 5,000 meters, but it is still much faster to climb than with the E4. The E4 is great for mixed battles as well. Due to the 1-ton bomb's large TNT content, it does not require pinpoint precision to score a kill. This is beneficial for the E4 since the bomber is pretty heavy to control at speeds. You can also use the 20mm cannon in a pinch to destroy SPAGs and, if you're lucky, hit some unsuspecting enemy fighter crossing your nose. Do not try to turn with anyone though. The E4 is bad at turning and quickly loses energy. At Battle Rating 5.0, we find the long-range strategic bomber for Germany. The Me-264 was tested as part of the so-called America Bomber program. The bomber never went past some prototype builds which were flown and tested but deemed not too large and powerful enough. In War Thunder, it is of course fully functional and is one of the best bombers in the game to ensure you will deliver the bombs on target. Let's look at some of the pros and cons. Some of the pros: flight characteristics. For a long-range bomber, the ME is fast with 515 km an hour, reached at 6,000 meters. Since you spawn at 5,500 meters, it is a breeze to reach the bomber's max speed altitude. Furthermore, because of the design of the bomber and the fact that all bombs are in the bomb bay, you only lose 2 km an hour in speed with a full bomb load, and that is quite rare to see. Wing limits are 600 km an hour, and I think that is impressive considering how large and thin the wings are. Flap speeds are okay with 370 and 357 km an hour for combat and takeoff flaps. Gear and takeoff flaps limits are good with 308 and 290 km an hour. With the high landing gear limit, you can help reduce the speed for landings with deploying the gear early. Turn time is also good for such a large aircraft with 40 seconds with a full bomb load. There is also something here that is off. The stat sheet says that the rate of climb with a bomb load is 1.3 meters a second. Without a bomb load, it's 3.5 meters a second. But the 264 climbs like a champion. You can place it in an almost 15-degree climb and still maintain around 240 km an hour. War emergency power. You can hit the web as soon as you spawn in and keep it on. The engines never overheat. Armament. The 264 has a lot of firepower with 20 and 30mm armed turrets, but more on that later. Takeoff. Often with these kind of large bombers, taking off is very slow and it can be a problem to get altitude, but not with the 264. It is equipped with 6 rocket boosters to help you get off the ground. They last for about 30 seconds and will greatly help with the initial buildup of speed and altitude. Landing gear. The Me-264 is the first German bomber equipped with tricycle landing gear. Once you have touched down, you can use the brakes and keep them on. The ME does not nose over. And some of the cons. Bomb load. For a heavy bomber, there is compared to the Lancaster not a lot going on in the bomb bay.
The Lancaster can drop 4 tons of TNT, while the ME-264 can only muster a little over half with 2.4 tons of TNT. Compared to other nations, except the TNT crazy British, the ME-264 is in the middle of the pack. Landing approach. When starting on the landing approach, you really need some time. The 264 loves speed and is not willing to give it up easily. It retains its speeds in turns at low altitudes, so when you return to the airfield in a 600 km/h plus dive and start to lose altitude, it can be a struggle to lose the speed and the altitude. Armor protection. The 264 only has armor protection for the pilot in his seat. I guess that the altitude and speed of the ME was supposed to be the main protection. No matter the reason, in-game it is pretty disappointing. Having bombload options is always nice, but often, as in the case with the ME-264, you really should only use a single bombload. Here it is the 4 1000 kg bombs. This is also the largest bombload TNT-wise with 2.4 tons. The ME-264 is the first bomber which can drop the 1.8 ton bomb, which contains 1000 kg of TNT. However, even the bombload with the 2 1800 kg bombs and the 3 250 kg bombs has 25 kg less total TNT compared to the 4 1000 kg bombs. But of course, if you want to watch the bigger bombs falling, feel free to do so. Starting out as usual with the dorsal turrets. Note here it said turrets as in multiple. Not only does the ME-264 have 2 dorsal turrets with 20mm MG151s, but, and hold on to your helmets, here we also find the very first turret that can rotate 360 degrees on a German bomber. And we only had to wait until battle rating 5.0 to get it. That was sarcasm, by the way. Also vertically we have a new record with plus 90 degrees, so they can shoot straight up, and depress minus 5 degrees. Moving on to the ventral position, here we find another 20mm cannon. After having been all excited about the dorsal turrets, we are in here for a disappointment with the guidances. Horizontal guidance are awful with only plus minus 15 degrees. Vertically it is also bad with only minus 35 and plus 5 degrees. However, the plus 5 degrees means that it can assist the dorsal turret with covering pretty much all of the rear of the bomber. Close to the rearmost dorsal and ventral positions, we have the waist position armed with MG131s. The horizontal guidances are 0 and plus 45 degrees. This means that these guns can pretty much lay flush with the fuselage pointing towards the rear of the bomber. They can, combined with the dorsal and ventral positions, shoot at the same times towards trailing planes, potentially hitting them with up to 4 or even 5 different guns at the same time. Vertical guidances are decent with plus minus 30 degrees. In the nose we have an almost useless gun position. It can only move 10 degrees in all directions, which translates into very limited ways to defend the bomber from frontal attacks. The saving grace are the dorsal turret's ability to cover the front above 10 degrees. You can with the 2 1.8 ton and 3 250 kg bombs destroy a little over 2 bases at the 264's battle rating. In up tiers, however, and to be safe, I usually just bring the 4 1000 kg bombs for more flexibility. The 3 250 kg bombs from the other bomb load only gives you an additional 375 kg of TNT, and the drop sequence of that bomb load is not optimal for fast space destruction in up tiers. The ME-264 is one of the most reliable bombers to be able to get your bombs on target and return safely. I still have a free repair on it, and I have had this bomber for a couple of years and used it quite a bit. The 264 really wants to climb as well. You barely have to do anything and it just keeps climbing on its own with no loss of significant speed. Most of the time when arriving over a target, even without side climbing, you find yourself at 6000 meters and often higher. In case you have to turn around to drop more bombs on a base or just wait to see what is going on, the 264 just keeps climbing, and it's not unusual to end up in 8000 meters just hanging out.
Bombload wise, around the same battle rating, it cannot hold a candle to the Lancaster, but none can. The ME sits in the middle of the pack ahead of the B-17 but slightly behind the YER-2. However, the ME is vastly superior over the YER-2 in all other regards. Like nearly all other heavy bombers, I do not think it belongs in mixed battles. It is much too large, slow turning, and its top speed is not gained at 1500 meters but at 6000 meters. And lastly, the bombload is not any better than the far more suited for mixed battles, the Dornier 217s. But in air battles, where the Me-264 belongs, it is one of my favorite heavy bombers in War Thunder.
Engaging the enemy.
Once you have dropped your bombs, you can, instead of heading back home, try look for enemy bombers to hunt down. With no bombs, you are very fast and can easily catch up with other long-range bombers. The enemy has plenty of firepower to both attack other bombers and defend itself against fighters. The largest downside for the 264 is really when you are returning to base. The bomber has huge wings, which means lift. It struggles with losing altitude and speed for landing approaches, and it takes a large amount of time. As soon as you get down to 370 km an hour, you need to deploy the combat flaps. They do help a lot with reducing the speed from then on. This may all sound like a luxury problem, but in game it is very annoying. At battle rating 5.3, we find another great medium bomber with the Junkers 188A2. The 188 is, in my opinion, the best regular medium bomber in the game when we talk about a mix between speed, handling, bomb load, and the ability to defend itself. I almost want to touch myself just thinking about it, but just almost. Let's look at some of the pros and cons. Some of the pros: flight characteristics. With the Ju-188, we have another fast bomber for Germany. Top speed is 520 km an hour clean at 6000 meters. Even with a full bomb load at 3500 meters, you can get up to over 460 km an hour in level flight. The rate of climb is also good with up to 8 meters a second with no external bomb load. Turn time says 32 seconds clean, but it feels much more nimble. The 188 can outperform some twin heavy engine fighters, and it is very responsive. Wing limits are high with almost 700 km an hour. Combat and takeoff flap speeds are as good as any fighter with 457 and 428 km an hour respectively. Landing gear speed is also high with 310 km an hour, and the landing flaps limits are good with 280 km an hour. Whip. The engines of the 188 does not overheat. You can hit whip when you spawn in and more or less keep it activated throughout the match. Bomb load. You have a good variety of bomb load options, and more about that in a bit. Armament. The Junkers has a lot of defensive firepower crammed into a small cockpit area, and more about that later. Armor protection. There are plates protecting both the pilot and all the gunners. And some of the cons. Bomb bay. The bomb bay itself is very small. It can only hold the 50 kg bombs and two 250 kg bombs. Any larger bombs and multiple 250 kg bombs have to be mounted under the wings, causing parasitic drag. Furthermore, the stock bomb load is only 10 50 kg bombs, and for a bomber at battle rating 5.3, that is pretty awful. Crew location. As with most German medium bombers, all the crew is located in a cramped, vulnerable cockpit. Landing. The 188 requires you to land pretty much at the stall speed around 130 km an hour. Any faster and the Junkers will bounce all over the place. You have 10 different loadouts to choose from, but as usual, when you have everything unlocked, there are only a few payloads you should stick to. The bomb load containing the most TNT is the two 1000 kg bombs, two 250 kg bombs, and 10 50 kg bombs. Combined total is 1.7 tons of TNT. The amount of TNT is okay, but still less than the Dornier 217's 2.4 tons of TNT. There are several good options here though. Another to mention is the 1000 and 1800 kg bomb load, or the 6 250 kg and 10 50 kg bomb one. It all depends on what you want to do in a match. The dorsal turrets are pretty cramped together, so I decided to put them both in one shot. On top we have a 360 degrees rotating turret armed with a 20mm MG151. Besides the much needed rotation, the turret can elevate 76 degrees, which is very nice, and also depress a good -5 degrees. Below the 20mm cannon we have a 30mm MG131. This gun's horizontal guidances are just okay with ±38 degrees. But the vertical guidances are good with +78 and -5 degrees. So you have two guns able to more or less shoot at the same target, trailing the bomber. Both have a blind spot just around the vertical stabilizer though, although it is pretty small. In the ventral position we find twin MG81s. The horizontal guidances are okay with ±40 degrees. And the vertical guidances are one of the better ones for this type of position with -50 and +2 degrees. In the nose we find the last position with another 20mm cannon. The horizontal guidances are poor with only ±15 degrees. Vertically it's a little better with +18 and -40 degrees. You can pretty much do whatever you want to in the 188. Everything works well using this bomber. You can go strictly ground pounding or base bombing. You can choose to dive towards a base. Just head to it at your spawn altitude or climb to altitude first. The speed and agility of the Junkers makes this possible. It is a very effective medium bomber. In an up-tier match as seen here, dropping the two 250 kg and one of the 1000 kg bombs was not enough to destroy a base. The second drop consisted of the second 1000 kg bomb and the 10 50 kg bombs. It did get closer to destroying a base, but it was still not enough. I had to return to base and rearm to get the job done, but then I had some bombs to spare to do some ground pounding. As another example, in a down tier, the two 250 kg bombs could almost take off half a base, while the 1000 kg bomb was just enough to destroy a base on its own, the end result being that I was able to destroy 3 bases in total. This is just an example on how important it is to look at the score screen to get an idea on what battle rating the match is when flying in a bomber. It will save you time and frustration in knowing just how many bombs are needed to destroy a base. The 188 is also great for mixed battles. Again, its bomb load and agility makes it an excellent addition to a battle rating 5.3 or 5.7 German lineup.
Enemy forces have captured a zone. Attention to the designated grid square.
At battle rating 6.0, we find the end of the line for the German prop bombers with the Heinkel 177A5. This Heinkel has, rightfully so, the largest bomb load of any German bomber. The Greif is, in my opinion, the most balanced of all of the last regular heavy prop bombers in the game. It has a good bomb load, it is fast, handles well, and can properly defend itself. None of the other nations' large prop bomber has this kind of balance. The Heinkel also has the distinction of being the cheapest of all of the end-of-the-line prop bombers of any nation, with only, in air quotes, costing 32,000 silver lions to replace. It is of course still very expensive, and the bomber should never be used without having a premium account running. Let's look at some of the pros and cons. Some of the pros: flight characteristics. The 177 is fast with 555 km an hour, reached at 6,000 meters, so you luckily do not have to climb to 9,000 meters like the B-29 or Tu-4 to find your max speed. Turn time is excellent with only 31 seconds clean and 34 seconds with an internal bomb load. Rate of climb is also good with around 6 meters a second with a full bomb load. Wing limits are very high for such a large bomber with almost 700 km an hour. Also, limits for combat and takeoff flaps are high with 431 and 406 km an hour. The limits for the landing gear is just okay though with 260 km an hour. And limits for landing flaps are good with 280 km an hour. Bomb load. As mentioned, the Greif has the largest bomb load of any German bomber with 3.6 tons of TNT, and more about that in a bit. Armament. The bomber is very well defended with a mix of 20, 13 and 7.92mm cannons and machine guns, and more about that in a bit. Armor protection. The Greif has armor protection for most of the gunners, and the entire bottom of the cockpit also has armor plates. Furthermore, the seat of the pilot is also armor protected. And some of the cons: low altitude. The Heinkel needs altitude to perform at its best. At low altitudes with a full bomb load, it is heavy and not easy to control. Bomb load. Although the 177 has the largest bomb load of any German prop bomber, because of the drop sequence, it can potentially mean that you will lose out on a large portion of the TNT dropped. Whip. The war emergency power can only be used for a short time before the engine starts to overheat, and you constantly have to monitor the engines if you use whip. Takeoff. The Heinkel is slow at picking up speed and requires a long runway to get airborne. It is definitely not advised trying to take off from any forward airfield. Landing. While you would think the 177 with its large wings could gently touch down at low speeds, that is not so. Stall speed is high with around 150 km an hour, so don't try to land slower than around 200 km an hour. That way you will have a little wiggle room and it will prevent you crashing into the ground. As impressive as the bomb load looks, it is not all that great. The largest amount of TNT is found in the two 1800 kg and six 500 kg bombs with 3.6 tons of TNT. Unfortunately, the two 1800 kg bombs with that bomb load are hanging under the wings, causing parasitic drag, and even worse, drop at the same time. This means that you in a down-to-hit match potentially are losing 1000 kilograms of TNT bombing a base. The second best bomb load is the 4 1000 kilogram bombs. But here we already are down to the same amount of TNT that the better rating 4.7 Dornier 217 can drop. Besides the Heinkel 111H6, this bomber is the only bomber able to use the Fritz X glide bomb. But unlike the 111, this bomber can carry 3 of them. Besides the recently added BV-138, the Greif is the only German bomber with a proper rear turret. Here we find the 20mm MG151 with a good 800 shells. Sadly and oddly enough, the guidances for this dedicated rear turret are very poor. Both horizontally and vertically, guidances are only plus/minus 20 degrees. Here we have the first of 2 dorsal turrets. This rearmost turret is armed with a single 13mm MG131 with plenty of ammunition. The turret can rotate 360 degrees and has a very good plus 80 degrees elevation and 0 degrees of gun depression. Closer to the cockpit we find this remotely operated turret with 2 13mm MG131s. You can just see the gunner's head sticking out in the other plexiglass bubble. The twin turret has 1000 rounds of ammo for each gun and it can rotate 360 degrees. Elevation is very close to perfect with plus 87 degrees and it has 0 degrees of gun depression. This ventral position has another 13mm MG131 and excellent guidances. Horizontal guidances are good with plus/minus 40 degrees, and here we also have a new record with minus 80 degrees of gun depression. Elevation is plus 3 degrees. I know this is a graphical glitch, but it's still funny to see how the bomb bay doors slam into the barrel of the gun. And speaking of, if you have the 3 Fritz X glide bombs attached, you should not even be able to use this ventral position, but in game I'm not really sure if you can or not. In the nose we have 2 defensive weapons. The first, manned by the navigator, is an actual useful gun position. Just too bad we do not find another 13mm heavy machine gun here. Horizontal guidances are good with plus/minus 40 degrees, and the vertical guidances are also fine with plus 60 and minus 20 degrees. The second, lower position, has a 20mm cannon operated by the ventral gunner. The horizontal guidances are very poor with only plus/minus 15 degrees. The vertical guidances are somewhat better with plus 7 and minus 40 degrees. As you would imagine, the 177 is only useful in air and naval battles. At battle rating 6.0 you can destroy 2 bases. Use the 2 1.8 ton bombs on one base and the 6 500 kg bombs on the other. In naval battles you should definitely try use the Fritz X glide bombs, or of course, alternatively, use the regular bombs on large vessels. Normally when I use the Heinkel I play pretty carefully because of the high SL cost, but everybody does that. You can, because of the speed of the Heinkel, fly straight towards the base, but depending on the size of the map, it is not certain that you will make it before being intercepted. The more traditional but time-consuming way is to side climb to around 7,000 meters before heading towards the bases. This way most of the fighters are already at low altitudes when you arrive over the target area. In objects, however, there's a chance that you will meet early jets that will stick around at high altitudes, making life difficult for you and your Silverlands. Now the elephant in the room is a certain Junkers 288 Charlie premium bomber, also battle rating 6.0. The Golden Eagles price aside, the 288 only cost 1/3 of the Heinkel 177 to replace with around 10k Silverlands. The Junkers also has much better RP and SL rewards attached to it. It cannot carry the same bomb load as the Greif, but it is pretty close. The 288 is faster and easier to fly with a much faster turnaround. While you with the 177 normally can do 1 bombing run, you can make 2 or 3 bombing runs with the Junkers. I know it's a premium, but if you talk about efficiency and cost, the Heinkel 177 sadly does not hold a candle to the premium aircraft. The only advantage the 177 has is being able to carry the Fritz X glide bomb. That is also why you rarely see this bomber in air battles, and I think it's very sad that the premium bomber killed off this otherwise excellent and interesting bomber. I really like the Heinkel 177 and I take it out on occasion to have a good time. If I however do an event or want to earn RP or SL, I would never use it and instead always use the Junkers 288. So this is another instance where Gaijin themselves killed off a large portion of the usefulness of a vehicle. Sad but true. These are my recommendations for the German bombers. Dornier 17 E1. I would not use the first DO 17. It has bad flight characteristics and limited bomb load. Just research it and move on. The DO 17 Z2 variant however is a different beast. It has much improved defensive armament, bomb load and flight characteristics. It's definitely worth using and spading. As a bomber, which this guide is all about, I would not use the BV-138. It has a very bad bomb load and can at best only destroy a single base. It is a fun but niche plane used for naval battles and as a gunship only. The first Heinkel 111 is another great bomber for battle rating 1.7. It has a better bomb load than the Dornier 17 Z2 and offers a slightly different playstyle. Definitely worth using and spading. I would skip the first of the Junkers 88s. The A1 variant is not nearly as good as the A4 variant, so don't bother with it. The A4 however is one of my favorite bombers of all times. It has a great bomb load, speed and handling and can defend itself. It is great for both air and mixed battles. The Focke-Wulf 200 is the first heavy bomber for Germany, but it's not super impressive. The bomb load is good, but the plane itself is slow, heavy and has poor defensive armament. If you want to use it, climb like a madman and stay at altitude where it's just a little safer, but you can easily skip this bomber. The last two Heinkel 111s are both good at their battle ratings. The H6 is more specialized as a naval bomber with torpedoes and the Fritz X glide bomb, and should be used there. The H16 is the strongest defensive-wise, but otherwise share the same bomb load as the H6 model. Depending on the battle rating you want to play at, both are great and should be used. The four Dornier 217s can be split up in two. Skip the E2 variant and use the E4 variant for mixed battles. Skip the K1 variant and use the M1 variant for base bombing. The ME-264, although only having the same bomb load as the Dornier 217s, is great at staying alive and return home. It is fast and has very good defensive armament. If you want safer bombing runs, use the ME-264. The Junkers 188 is another really good medium bomber. Spade and use the hell out of it. It's great for both air and mixed battles. Do not use the Heinkel 177 if you do not run a premium account. It is much too expensive. If you happen to own the Junkers 288, you should never use the Greif anyhow. It's very sad that the 288 has made this great flying and great looking bomber pretty much obsolete. And that was about it for this guide. If you liked the video and the content on my channel in general, please remember to give it a like and consider to subscribe. You can also go the extra mile and support me directly. But every kind of support is very much appreciated. Thank you for watching, and until next time, remember to deploy your die brakes. Have a good one.